Welcome to the Maryland Means Business Podcast.
Cal, I looked at today's rundown, and I have a bone to pick before we even start.
Already? We haven't said a single fact yet.
All three of today's stories come out of Governor Moore's office. All three. We joked back in July that we needed a counter on the wall for how often his name shows up as our lead. I think it's time we actually build the counter.
I'll get the plywood. But in fairness, when the state hands you a nursing loan fund, a teacher pipeline grant, and a $300 million energy deal in the same 48 hours, you don't get to be picky about the byline.
Fair. Today we've got nurses, teachers, and the power grid. A pretty good trifecta of things Maryland businesses actually depend on, even if none of them are exactly a ribbon cutting at a new storefront.
Let's start with the one that's going to hit home for anybody who's tried to hire a nurse lately.
Oh, this is my favorite kind of story. Yesterday, Maryland and a nonprofit called Social Finance announced the Maryland Pay It Forward Fund, $3 million, and here's the shape of it. $2 million from the state's Talent Innovation Fund, $1 million in philanthropic money from a group called Blue Meridian Partners.
And what does the money actually do?
0% interest loans for students in associate degree and nursing programs, up to $5,000 to close the tuition gap after scholarships, and up to $500 a month for living expenses, capped at $12,000 over the 2-year program.
And here's the part I actually love. You don't pay a dime back until you're earning more than $50,000 a year. So if nursing school doesn't pan out the way you hoped, the debt doesn't follow you around and ruin your 20s.
Exactly. It's launching as a pilot with the Community College of Baltimore County starting this academic year, and they're expecting to help about 80 nursing students in year 1.
80 sounds small until you remember Maryland has roughly 7,000 open nursing positions right now, with turnover that just keeps the revolving door spinning. Every single nurse this fund gets across the finish line is a real dent in that number.
What's the catch, though? There's usually a catch.
Honestly, the closest thing to a catch is scale. It's one pilot, one community college, 80 students. This isn't fixing the nursing shortage by itself, but the repayment structure is smart enough that if it works, there's an obvious next move. Take it statewide.
Governor Moore put it this way. This partnership aids the work of building a stronger pipeline by breaking barriers to entry and making sure aspiring nurses get the aid they need to serve our communities.
If you're a business owner and you think workforce shortages are somebody else's problem, healthcare touches every payroll in the state. Every time a clinic can't fill a shift, that cost gets passed around. Higher premiums, longer waits, more strain on the urgent care your employees use. This is the kind of unglamorous, boring-sounding fund that actually moves the needle.
Speaking of pipelines, Cal, you're going to like this next one. It's basically the same idea, but for teachers.
Let's keep score here. Wednesday, the state announced the second round of its Grow Your Own Educators grants, $14.7 million, supporting 845 educators across Maryland.
Walk us through who actually gets it, because it's not evenly split.
Anne Arundel County leads at $3.6 million, Frederick County, $3.1 million, St. Mary's County, $3 million, then Charles and Howard counties each around $1.5 million, an Eastern Shore consortium of 7 districts splitting about $1.1 million, and Worcester County getting $829,000.
I love that the Eastern Shore Consortium made the list. 7 districts pooling together instead of each one fighting alone for scraps. That's very Maryland, very Main Street. Help your neighbor because you're all in the same boat.
And what this actually pays for is letting people already working in schools, people without a teaching license yet, earn full licensure while they keep their job and their paycheck. No going back to school full-time and hoping the bills wait.
So a classroom aide who's been dreaming of leading her own room for years doesn't have to quit to chase it.
Debt-free, too, which is the headline for me. The focus areas are special education, early childhood, and diversity recruitment, which are exactly the spots where Maryland schools have been scrambling for years.
State Superintendent Wright's line was that by investing in local talent, they're building sustainable, diverse teacher pipelines that strengthen student learning. I'll be a little skeptical for a second, Cal. $14 million sounds big until you spread it across 845 people.
That's fair. And I won't pretend this alone fixes teacher shortages. But growing your own is cheaper and stickier than importing talent from out of state, because these are people who already live here, already work in the building, and are far less likely to leave in 3 years for a job in Virginia.
Okay, hot take time. If you're a Maryland employer in literally any industry, pay attention to this grow your own model, because the labor market for skilled workers is going to keep being brutal, and homegrown talent pipelines beat poaching from your competitor down the street.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, Chessie, you've been sitting on the last one, I can tell.
You know me too well. Save the biggest number for last. That's the rule.
Chessie's rule lives on. Let's hear it.
Also Wednesday, Maryland locked in a 20-year deal with a company called Rev Renewables to buy power from something called the Jade Meadow 3 solar project. The state says it'll save $300 million over the life of the contract.
Let's translate the jargon for a second, because I know 20-year power purchase agreement makes people's eyes glaze over. A PPA is basically the state locking in a price for electricity for 2 decades, the same way you'd lock in a mortgage rate instead of riding the market up and down every month.
And this one's a big lock. 300 megawatts of solar, roughly 250,000 megawatt hours a year, enough to power over 20,000 homes. The state's buying about half the output for its own buildings and operations.
This actually connects to something we talked about back in July, when PJM's big regional power auction landed at a price cap that avoided $13.3 billion in extra costs across Maryland and a dozen other states. That was the region pre-booking electricity supply for a couple years. This is Maryland doing its own version, but locking in for 2 decades instead of 2 years.
Same instinct, longer horizon. Here's the detail I actually love, though. This project isn't going on a farm field somewhere. It's going up in Garrett County, out in western Maryland, on a reclaimed coal mine site.
That's the part that gets me too. You've got land that used to power the state one way, now powering it another way, in the same corner of Maryland that's felt every energy transition first and hardest.
It goes online in 2028, and once it does, it doubles the renewable power the state buys directly through these long-term contracts and covers close to 15% of the state's whole energy portfolio.
Governor Moore called it a major win for reliable, clean energy. And look, I'll play the skeptic for a second. $298 million to $515 million is a wide range for a savings estimate.
It is, because it depends on where electricity prices land over 20 years, and nobody has a crystal ball that good. But even at the low end, that's real money staying out of the state budget's energy line, and locking in a price now is exactly the kind of move that protects you when the market spikes later.
Which, Chessie, is basically the whole pitch behind our sponsor, too. More on that in a second.
Real quick, before we wrap the trifecta, can we just sit with the fact that we opened with a nursing fund, moved to a teacher fund, and closed with a power deal, and somehow none of them mentioned a single storefront or startup? Where are the grand openings this week, Cal?
Slow week for ribbon cuttings, busy week for the state's checkbook. I'll take it. Infrastructure and workforce stories don't get the fanfare of a new restaurant opening, but ask any owner who's tried to hire a nurse or keep the lights on cheap, which one actually saves the money.
Fair point. All right, before we go, 2 quick things. First, thank you for spending part of your day with us. If you want the sources behind every fact we just gave you, they're linked in the show notes, no exceptions.
Second, this episode is brought to you by Maryland Smart Energy. Smarter buildings, smarter bills. Kind of fitting after a story about the state locking in cheaper power for the next 20 years. Maryland Smart Energy does the same thing for your business, just on a much smaller scale, helping Maryland companies cut their energy costs through utility-funded programs. Nothing out of pocket.
And right now through September, that includes HVAC tune-ups at no out-of-pocket cost, fully funded by Empower Maryland. You're already paying into that program through the Empower line on your utility bill, so this is just making sure you actually use what you've already paid for.
Beat the last of the summer heat without writing a check for it. Find them at mdsmartenergy.com.
And since we're on the subject of being deliberate about costs, this show is made almost entirely with AI, and we're picky about which tools we use. We choose ones from companies that pay their own way, covering the energy and grid costs their data centers use, with water-efficient cooling, instead of pushing those costs onto Maryland households. Same idea as our sponsor. Keep the costs where they belong.
Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And now on YouTube if you'd rather watch than listen.
And head to marylandmeans.business for the newsletter, so you never miss a rundown.
That's the show. Nurses, teachers, and a power grid that's a little cheaper for the next 20 years. Not bad for 1 week.
And remember, Maryland means business.